Call of Duty has officially revealed not only Modern Warfare 2 gameplay, but Warzone 2 and even a little bit of information on DMZ as well. But within this reveal, they may have given us, quite honestly, just a little bit more information than most people can handle. So I've taken the opportunity, as I sadly wasn't invited to play early, to dive deep into the details shared during the Call of Duty Next streams to compose all this information into a more digestible format. However, before we get into things, you need to know Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2 are very tightly integrated. In fact, I'll really only be focusing on Warzone simply because, first, it's what I love so dearly about the Call of Duty franchise, but more importantly, it's what I imagine most players are going to be enjoying as it's free to play, unlike Modern Warfare 2. Without further ado, let's go ahead and slide right into all the wonderful things we know so far. To start off, as previously stated, these games were developed quite literally side by side. This means not only are they going to have the same mechanics, but the storyline and the world itself is going to be one in the same. Now, I'm not sure how many of you struggled to follow the storyline of the original Warzone, but personally, it felt kind of like a mess to me. As an example, we can look into how Infinity Ward has began building out the multiplayer game modes. They stated the large maps created for DMZ and Warzone will actually be from not only older Call of Duty titles, but a collection of points of interest from Modern Warfare 2 maps. This means it could include the smaller 6v6 or even the massive ground war maps. Either way, hopefully with these two games being so tightly integrated, we won't have that same problem and we can begin to create connections to the characters as we would have in a Call of Duty campaign, which, by the way, let me see a show of hands in the comments for who's excited about the upcoming Modern Warfare 2 campaign. Moving directly into Warzone 2, I felt it was best to separate all this information into 4 different segments, and those are as follows: general gameplay, gameplay mechanics, user interface, and additional info. As for general gameplay, there's honestly a lot to unpack here, especially with how different Warzone 2 is going to be from the original that we all know and love. Firstly, the most important thing you need to know, and something that's going to immediately be upsetting to most people, is the change in loadouts. And by change, I mean they removed them from Warzone 2 entirely. This is going to be a pretty controversial point, especially seeing as loadouts have always been the core mechanic that separated Warzone from other battle royales. However, as a content creator and someone that plays this almost every single day, I'll give a bit of my opinion on this. Off rip, I highly recommend everyone to not be so close-minded. I don't necessarily agree 100% with the decision, but I do see why they would remove the loadouts. To begin with, no battle royale has ever really had a mechanic like that in-game, and because it's been in Warzone for the past few years, we've seen that it can make the game unbelievably stale. What ends up happening is everyone tries a gun for a few days, then realizes it's not worth it, and goes back to whatever meta class setup J-God told everyone to use, and honestly, it just gets old. Creating this game, the developers wanted to put a huge focus on the fun element, rather than just the grinding to get the same gun as every other pro streamer is using, and I genuinely think while a lot of people are going to be upset with this change, this could be a step in the right direction. However, past loadouts, there's so much more. To begin with, just like we've seen with Fortune's Keep, the new Warzone map, Al-Mazrah, I'm not 100% sure, has a lot of different terrain types. Whether it be rivers, mountains, or cities, if you can name it, it's likely in there. For any of those bush campers, don't worry, there's plenty of areas for you to hide and pop out at just the right moment to get your very first Warzone 2 elimination. On the topic of the map, I'm sure you're wondering what it looks like color-wise, and I can confirm it's a bit more saturated than Verdansk, but seemingly a little bit less saturated than Caldera. You're going to have some colorful spots on the map, but when you get into the areas that are a bit more dusty, it's definitely going to feel that way by the lack of vibrancy. As for vehicles, don't you fret, not only are they making a comeback, they're going to be bigger and better than ever. There's going to be all kinds of different vehicles to traverse the map, and honestly, you're going to need them, as this is single-handedly the biggest map we've ever seen in any Call of Duty game, and no, that is not a joke. The kinds of vehicles include helicopters, tanks, yes tanks, Land Rovers, boats, and all kinds of other armored transportation. Additionally, they all have different ways you can dynamically shoot out of the vehicle. Oh, and there's a train moving through certain parts of the map, so if you want to hop on and take a ride, you can. To further explain just how big the map is, though, here are the 18 official points of interest that can be found throughout Al Mazrah. Oasis, Tarak Village, I don't know. Quarry, Rohan Oil, Al Mazrah City, Port, Hydroelectric, Marshlands, Said City, Observatory, Al Sharim Pass, Sawa Village, how do you say that? Cemetery, Akhdar Village, Serif Bay, Airport, and Fortress. Furthermore, look how spaced out they are. This doesn't even include the unnamed locations. Throughout these locations, however, you're going to find areas highly guarded by lethal AI bots called strongholds. Strongholds are known to have higher tier loot. However, when you defeat all the AI in the strongholds, they can drop a key that will lead you to black sites that provide even higher loot. Yeah, that's a bit wild. And before you make an embarrassing mistake, there are also elevators that you can ride to different floors and buildings throughout the map. Just don't stand in the way of the doors closing. Outside of the actual map, we are of course getting an all-new, revamped Gulag 2.0. While this gulag isn't exactly what we're used to, it's actually pretty cool. Basically, you hop into the gulag and you'll be paired with a random player as a teammate. Both you and that random player will be facing off against another duo of random players. You'll be forced to loot weapons off the ground and defend yourself from not only the enemies you're facing, but also a few AI thrown in as a distraction. To win this gulag, you'll need to either eliminate the other two enemies, or you can find a key in the middle of the arena, pick it up, and run to the exit to be extracted. Now, while our next section is related to Warzone 2's general gameplay, I found there were way too many changes from the original Warzone to not give gameplay mechanics its own piece of the pie. And let me tell you why. Slide canceling is no longer in the game, so it's going to feel more slowed down for the casual player. They've also added a new diving mechanic that just clears the height of most windows, which doesn't inherently seem broken, but we'll see how that goes later on. You now take fall damage based on the height of a fall, not like in the original Warzone where you just die after 13 meters. As for the aforementioned new vehicles, they now have a fuel gauge and will require you to go to gas stations to fill up. They can also have random pieces like doors blown off of them, or even have the tires popped. And when the tires are popped, you can take them to those same gas stations to get them fixed. While driving them, and especially when being fired upon, the vehicles all have different feels to them, meaning they can be sliding, slowing down, tilting, etc. I do think it's important to mention that during the alpha testing that was done, there were only 102 players per match. However, I'm not 100% certain we won't see any more than this when the game releases. And my point when saying this is that you're going to need to get really comfortable with those vehicles if you're wanting to get more eliminations. When you die in Warzone or even in multiplayer, you're actually going to be spectating players from a different perspective. They've moved the cameras from the first-person perspective we're used to onto the side of the player's helmet. This means it's going to look a little weird at first, at least until we get used to it. As for my personal favorite new mechanic, and the one I think I'm going to have the most fun with, proximity chat has made its way into Warzone. This means when you're near an enemy in-game, if you're speaking through in-game chat, you can hear them and they can hear you communicating with your teammates. Or if you're anything like me, you're probably gonna hop in solos and mess with as many enemies as you can. As for our final gameplay mechanic, looting, I thought it would be best to first explain looting works similarly, but not entirely the same. So when you first hop in, you're probably going to be thrown off. But once you get used to it, and it seemed most of the players at Call of Duty Next were beginning to pretty quickly, it shouldn't be too big of an issue. However, there are a ton of changes, so let's dive right in. Firstly, we're still going to have our beloved humming crates, but other than that, there's going to be quite a few changes. Yes, there's loot on the ground, but it's not the same kind of loot. See, out in the open, you're likely to find weapons and ammo, but if you're trying to find specific gear, you're likely going to need to look where it makes the most sense for it to be hiding. This means you're going to find health items indoors, inside medicine cabinets and first aid kits, which, by the way, can be on the wall of a room. You're going to find grenades and other equipment in toolboxes, cash registers can be holding money, and lastly, you're going to find higher tier weapons in actual weapon crates. There There are, however, a lot of changes to the lootable items themselves. There's backpacks laying around the map that can increase the amount of space you have in your inventory by 5 slots because, trust me, you're going to need it. Armor satchels are now used to give you 1 more slot for plates as you begin with only 2. They can also be carried to teammates in your inventory when needed. If you eliminate an enemy that's holding a self-revive in their inventory, it will now drop on the ground as a lootable item. Safes can be found throughout the map and blown up to reveal high-value loot, guns, kill streaks, etc. And if you loot just a little too much and your inventory becomes full, you'll have to drop or switch out items in your inventory to loot anything new. Moving into our third section, we have user interface updates. This is a personal favorite of mine because I've always been a fan of taking something that inherently feels clunky and turning it into something that can be used with ease. To begin with, buy stations have been updated. They've been broken down into 3 tabs, which are buy weapons. This has a list of over a dozen weapons you can buy, upgrade weapons, and it didn't look like anyone used this during the playtesting, but I'm assuming you could get some killer attachments for your weapons. And finally, buy gear. This has items such as self-revives, gas masks, armor plates, armor box, ammo box, as well as tactical equipment. You now loot inside of chests rather than having the items simply pop out onto the ground. This means they have a clean interface that you can scrub through. As for the map, there's going to be a ton of new markers, but the most important thing to know is that contracts have an updated look and strongholds show on the map as a castle-style icon. As for other additional information that just doesn't seem to fit in any other category, Ricochet will officially be making a comeback. However, we do not know and haven't been given any information as to what capacity it will be returning. However, ranked mode will also finally be rearing its beautiful mug in Warzone 2, and again, they really didn't give us any information on this specifically. But lastly, here are all the important dates that you need to know as a Warzone or a multiplayer player. As for the Modern Warfare 2 beta, for players that pre-ordered on PlayStation, the beta goes live from September 16th through the 17th, and on the 18th through the 20th will be open for all PlayStation users. The crossplay beta for those that pre-ordered will go live on the 22nd through the 23rd and will be open for everyone in the world on the 24th through the 26th. But more importantly, Warzone 2 will have its worldwide debut, free to play for everyone, on November 16th. But I'm hoping that you subscribe to the channel before then, because my goal is to make you the greatest Warzone player you can be. And if you don't believe me, check out this video filled with the absolute best Warzone tips you can find.